Why you feel tired all the time mentally. You slept enough. You drank the coffee. You pushed through your responsibilities and made it through another day. But somehow your mind still feels heavy. Not the kind of tiredness that disappears after a nap or a lazy weekend. This is a deeper exhaustion, the kind that sits quietly in the background of everything you do. You feel drained before the day even begins. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. Conversations require effort. Even things you used to enjoy now feel mentally demanding. A lot of people carry this kind of exhaustion without understanding where it comes from. They assume they need more motivation, better discipline, or another productivity routine. But mental fatigue is rarely caused by laziness. More often, it's the result of living in a world that constantly demands your attention, emotional energy, and focus without giving your mind enough time to recover. Modern life keeps the brain overstimulated almost every second of the day. Even when your body is resting, your thoughts continue racing. Stress lingers quietly beneath the surface. Notifications never stop. Expectations pile up. And over time, the mind becomes exhausted from carrying more than it was ever designed to handle continuously. Mental exhaustion doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it simply looks like waking up already tired. Your brain never truly gets quiet. One of the biggest reasons people feel mentally exhausted is because their minds almost never experience genuine silence anymore. From the moment most people wake up, their brains are immediately flooded with information. Notifications appear before breakfast. Emails demand attention. Social media updates pull focus in every direction. News headlines create anxiety before the day even properly begins. The modern brain exists in a constant state of stimulation. Even during moments that are supposed to feel relaxing, the mind is still consuming content. People scroll through videos while eating, listening to podcasts while driving, check messages while watching television, and switch between apps every few minutes. There is almost no space left for stillness. The problem is that the human brain was never built to process nonstop stimulation 24 hours a day. It needs moments of quiet in order to recover, organize thoughts, regulate emotions, and recharge mentally. Without those pauses, the nervous system remains active for too long, almost like an engine that never shuts off completely. This constant mental noise creates invisible exhaustion. You may notice it immediately because the fatigue builds slowly over time. Eventually, however, the brain begins to show signs of overload. Concentration weakens. Small tasks start feeling frustrating. Patience disappears more quickly. Even simple decisions begin to feel mentally draining. Even small inconveniences start feeling mentally frustrating because your brain no longer has the energy to process stress calmly. A lot of people think they are resting when they spend hours scrolling online, but passive consumption is not true mental recovery. Your brain is still processing images, sounds, emotions, comparisons, and information at a rapid pace. Real rest often requires the exact thing people avoid most: silence. Without moments of stillness, the mind never fully rests, and it never resets. And when the brain never gets a chance to breathe, exhaustion becomes your normal state. Overthinking quietly drains your energy. Mental exhaustion is not always caused by what happens around you. Sometimes it comes from what never stops happening inside your head. Overthinking is one of the most exhausting habits the mind can develop because it creates constant psychological activity without resolution. The brain becomes trapped in loops of analyzing, replaying, imagining, worrying, and predicting outcomes that may never happen. You replay conversations after they end. You question your decisions repeatedly. You imagine worst-case scenarios before anything even goes wrong. And even though none of this may involve physical effort, it still consumes enormous amounts of mental energy. The brain often struggles to distinguish between imagined stress and real stress. When you continuously worry about something, your nervous system reacts as though the threat is already happening. Your body becomes tense, your thoughts speed up, your mind stays alert for danger. Over time, this creates exhaustion that feels very real, even if nothing physically demanding occurred during the day. Overthinking also prevents emotional closure. Instead of processing experiences and moving forward, the mind keeps reopening unfinished thoughts and again. This creates a feeling of mental clutter where the brain never fully relaxes because it is constantly searching for certainty or control. Many people who are mentally exhausted are not necessarily doing too much physically. They are simply thinking too much emotionally and psychologically. Their minds are carrying endless, invisible conversations all day long. This is why you can feel completely drained after spending hours worrying, doubting yourself, or mentally preparing for situations that haven't even happened yet. Your thoughts become work, and eventually your brain starts responding the same way the body responds to overtraining, with fatigue. Emotional stress creates invisible weight. Some of the heaviest forms of exhaustion cannot be seen from the outside. A person may look completely fine while internally carrying enormous emotional pressure every single day. Stress from relationships, family, expectations, financial struggles, loneliness, heartbreak, anxiety, insecurity, or unresolved trauma can quietly drain mental energy over time without anyone noticing. Emotional stress is exhausting because the brain is constantly trying to process feelings while still functioning normally in daily life. People go to work while grieving. They smile while feeling overwhelmed. They continue conversations while mentally falling apart inside. Pretending to be okay requires energy too. A lot of people become mentally tired because they spend most of their lives suppressing emotions instead of processing them. They push feelings aside in order to stay productive, avoid conflict, or maintain appearances. But ignored emotions do not disappear. The brain continues carrying them in the background, which slowly increases psychological fatigue. People often try to fix emotional exhaustion entirely inside their heads. They analyze their feelings repeatedly, search for answers, force themselves to think positively, or mentally fight against the stress nonstop. But emotional pressure cannot always be solved immediately through thought alone, and constantly trying to mentally escape it often creates even more exhaustion. Eventually, the mind starts running into the same invisible wall over and over again. Chronic emotional stress also keeps the nervous system in a prolonged state of tension. When the mind constantly expects pressure, disappointment, or emotional pain, the body struggles to fully relax. Sleep becomes less restorative. Focus weakens. Motivation declines. Eventually, exhaustion begins affecting every part of life. One of the hardest things about emotional exhaustion is that it often feels invalid because it cannot be measured physically. People tell themselves they should not feel tired because they haven't done enough. But emotional survival itself can become exhausting. The human mind was never meant to carry unprocessed emotional weight forever. Eventually, the pressure shows up as mental fatigue, numbness, irritability, or burnout. Sometimes you are not tired because you work too hard physically. You are tired because your emotions have been carrying too much for too long. Constant distraction is destroying your focus. The human brain performs best when it can focus deeply on one thing at a time. Unfortunately, modern life encourages the exact opposite. Most people spend their entire day switching attention every few minutes. A task gets interrupted by a notification. A message leads to social media. Social media leads to another video. An email appears while working. Multiple tabs stay open constantly. Conversations happen while checking phones. The brain never fully settles anywhere. Although this behavior has become normal, it places enormous stress on mental focus. Every time attention shifts, the brain uses energy to stop one process and begin another. This repeated resetting creates cognitive overload, even if the tasks themselves are relatively simple. Over time, constant distraction weakens concentration and increases mental fatigue. People begin feeling exhausted not because they work deeply, but because their minds were pulled into many directions at once. This also explains why many people struggle to feel mentally clear anymore. Their attention has become fragmented. The brain rarely enters a state of calm focus because it is constantly reacting to external stimulation. The effects become noticeable in everyday life. Reading becomes harder, patience shortens, memory weakens, productivity decreases despite spending more hours working. Eventually, even basic tasks begin feeling mentally overwhelming because the brain is operating in a continuous state of interruption. True focus gives the brain structure and efficiency. Constant distraction does the opposite. It forces the mind into chaos. Mental exhaustion often has less to do with the amount of work you are doing and more to do with how fragmented your attention has become while doing it. Rest and escape are not the same thing. A major reason people remain mentally exhausted is because they confuse distraction with recovery. After long, stressful days, many people turn to endless scrolling, binge-watching shows, gaming for hours, or consuming nonstop content in order to relax. While these activities may temporarily distract the brain from stress, they do not always provide genuine mental rest. The mind is still active, and it is still processing information, emotions, visuals, sounds, comparisons, and stimulation continuously. The brain may feel entertained, but entertainment is not always the same thing as recovery. Real mental rest often feels much quieter and less stimulating than people expect. It can come from taking a walk without your phone, spending time in nature, journaling thoughts, having meaningful conversations, practicing creativity, meditating, reading slowly, or simply sitting in silence for a while. The problem is that true rest can feel uncomfortable at first because silence allows thoughts and emotions to surface. Many people avoid stillness because they are used to constant stimulation. But without intentional recovery, the brain never fully resets itself. Sleep alone is also not always enough to repair mental exhaustion. Someone can sleep 8 hours and still wake up emotionally drained if their stress levels remain constantly high. Recovery requires both physical and psychological rest. A healthy mind needs moments where it is not performing, consuming, comparing, or reacting. It needs space to exist without pressure. Rest is not just taking a break from work. It is giving your nervous system permission to stop carrying survival mode all the time. You may be living in survival mode without realizing it. When stress continues for long periods of time, the brain eventually adapts in order to protect itself. This state is often called survival mode. In survival mode, the mind stops focusing on fulfillment and starts focusing only on getting through the day. You wake up tired, complete responsibilities mechanically, distract yourself when possible, and repeat the cycle again tomorrow. Life begins to feel emotionally flat. You may notice that your motivation disappears even for things you once cared about. Small tasks feel unusually difficult. Joy becomes harder to access. Your brain feels foggy and disconnected. You function, but you no longer feel fully present. This happens because chronic stress changes the way the nervous system operates. The brain prioritizes safety, efficiency, and emotional protection over creativity, excitement, and deep engagement. Over time, this creates numbness and exhaustion that can feel impossible to explain. Many people blame themselves for this state. They call themselves lazy, unmotivated, or weak. But often, their minds are simply overloaded from carrying too much pressure for too long without enough recovery. Survival mode can develop from many things: financial stress, academic pressure, burnout, emotional trauma, unhealthy environments, constant anxiety, or years of emotional suppression. The difficult part is that people often become so used to functioning this way that they forget what mental peace even feels like. Living in survival mode means your brain rarely feels safe enough to fully relax. And when the nervous system stays activated for too long, mental exhaustion becomes chronic. Sometimes your mind is not failing you. It is trying to protect you the only way it knows how. Conclusion: mental exhaustion rarely appears all at once. It builds gradually through stress, overstimulation, emotional pressure, overthinking, distraction, and the absence of genuine rest. Over time, the brain becomes overloaded from constantly carrying more than it can recover from. That is why so many people feel tired even when they technically did nothing. Their minds have been active nonstop beneath the surface. They are carrying invisible pressure every day without giving themselves enough space to slow down mentally and emotionally. Feeling mentally exhausted all the time does not automatically mean you are lazy, weak, or incapable. Sometimes it simply means your brain has been surviving for too long without proper recovery. And often, the answer is not forcing yourself to push harder. Sometimes the answer is learning how to rest before your mind completely burns out.